Ladies and gentlemen, the man, the myth, the legend, Magnus Carlsen has done it once again. If you are just tuning in to this video, you have not been keeping up with the tournament that he is currently playing. It's his worst tournament in a decade. 10 years of chess this man has played since 2015 have not matched the disaster of a tournament that he is having right now in Oslo, in Norway, in his hometown. Norway Chess 2026. Now, if you have been following the tournament, you know. But this time, just when the reports of Magnus Carlsen's decline are spreading all over, he's never going to play classical chess again. This man pulls out a vintage performance, and that is what I'm going to show you in today's video. This man is a menace. When he is playing at the level that he is supposed to be playing, he will beat absolutely everybody. Today's video is sponsored by me, all right? Friendly reminder, got the tour coming up later this year in Europe. Get a ticket if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you all there. And if you haven't pre-ordered the second book, I have just added 100 bonus exercises to the online content of this book. Both my books, How to Win at Chess 1 and 2 for intermediates, they all have bonus content. Yeah, it's just been a while since I self-sponsored myself. All right, we're going to get into the games. Very quick sponsor read. I spoiled everything. Magnus played the move e4. Magnus is playing Alireza Firouzja in the 6th round of this tournament, and this tournament is what we call a double round robin. And what that means is you play everybody twice. The first time that they played, which was about a week ago, Alireza defeated Magnus, and that's where kind of everything started to spiral. Magnus plays e4, Alireza plays e5, very chill, not going for a Sicilian defense, which at the high level is the opening that you play if you want to win with the black pieces. Also not the Caro-Kann, the Scandinavian, the Peerts, the French, the Alekhine, the modern, etc., etc. You play e5, knight f3, knight c6. Now, Magnus has made his bread and butter over the course of his career in e4, e5 positions with both colors. We have the Spanish, Ruy Lopez. Black can play many things. This is the classical main line, bishop a4, knight f6. And now we have the first deviation. I made a video recently here in 2026. It might be hard because I make hundreds of videos about Magnus. And in my defense, it's because he's the best player in the world. If one of you was the best player in the world, I would make a lot of videos about you. So just get better at chess and don't complain. Now, in those many hundreds of videos, and in the recent one, it was called, This Game Proved Magnus Carlsen is Not Human. One of the pillars of the Magnus Carlsen school of chess is to take the opponent away from an opening that they know. In this position, after the knight attacks the pawn, historically, white castles in like 90% of the games. 85. In the other, 14%, white goes d3, defending the pawn right away. That's just one of the ways to play. One of the moves you almost never see in the Spanish, despite it being a very natural beginner move, is knight c3. 99% of you would put your knight on c3 to defend the center pawn, because that's what you're taught. Yes. But every opening is a little bit different, and as you get better at chess, you learn that this knight generally does not belong on c3 in the Italian or the Spanish. Generally, d3 and c3 are played. The bishop is brought back to c2. This knight is actually transferred this way, oftentimes to put pressure on the opposing king and not stand here. That pawn is there, and that pawn supports the center. That's the way you play this. Knight c3 is already a major deviation. Now black has a lot of different choices. Black can play bishop e7 or bishop c5. That's the major choice. You can play b5 now or later. He goes bishop e7, Alireza, after 7 minutes of thinking. Magnus plays castles. Now we have b5, bishop b3, and now we sort of see the idea. The d5 square is totally secured by white, but this knight does not have a very good future and will probably have to be moved because it's, unless you move it onto d5, right? Castles. I meant moved this way. d3, d6. Very chill game. Magnus plays a3. Now, the game kind of has gone back to something more well-known. Knight c3 is generally not played here. You can play d3, and then you get the same line in the game. But in this position, this is a very, very well-known position, and you see that white really wants that square. So white oftentimes will play bishop g5 and even take the knight just to establish a full control of d5. Hey, remember in the beginning of the video, I promoted my second book for intermediate level play, up to like 1700 roughly. One of the chapters is on gaining control of outpost squares for knights in the middle of the board, fighting for key squares, and which trades would require that. Chapter 3. Yeah, in this game, we see knight a5. trying to hit the bishop. The bishop goes here, and now Alireza plays bishop e6. This has all been played before. You want to secure control over the d5 square, which is why you go bishop to e6. Now here, ironically, Magnus does something a little bit strange. You would think you don't want to give your opponent control of d5. And the fastest way to do that is to take this bishop. And after this, you will never put your knight on d5, ever. Ever. So why did Magnus do that? Well, this is like a typical Magnesian thing. You make this transformation, black has doubled pawns. Okay, those are doubled pawns. This pawn could be a weakness in the long run, and this rook is a little bit open, right? But that is the imbalance that has been created after this bishop trade. Now Magnus plays b4. He pushes the knight away. Putting it on b7 would be moronic. Knight c6 makes a lot more sense. And now bishop d2. So we have a relatively symmetrical position with a lot of pawn play remaining and a lot of piece play. Where do you commit your queen? Do you play d5? Do you play for a5? Does white play for d4 or a4 or c4? Pawn breaks in a closed position of 8 pawns each are very, very important. Do you initiate an exchange like this? Should black go knight d4, looking to transform the pawn structure that way? I don't know. Alireza goes queen e8. It is quite clear when a person goes queen e8, they only have negative intentions. They want to bring the queen over here. The queen is going to target the white king. Maybe the rook will centralize in some distant future. Also, you free up d8 in case you ever need it for some reason. So now a very interesting choice by white. What do? And now we play knight to e2. So we reroute the knight. So knight reroute, chapter 3, how to win at chess next level. Not out yet, October 6, 2026. Magnus clearly read the book, though. I sent him an early copy. And in chapter 3, we talk about reroutes. Well, you reroute a piece, go back. And this does several things for the white position. Number one, you can always bring your knight over here, where it will potentially support the king and an attack and counter queen h5 business. Number two, it opens up the c3 square for you to push your pawn and then build up in the center. Or c3, which also activates the queen, and then you can play a4. Alireza plays knight h5. Knight h5 does two things. Number one, opens up the rook. Number two, gains control of f4. And number three kind of opens up the bishop. So we see how every move affects everything else. Now Magnus plays c3. So everything is defended, the knight is kind of countered, and maybe you want to go d4 yourself. Maybe. All right? Queen g6. A very natural move. And now, knight g3. So the knights are having a conversation. Taking by black would be a very poor decision. White could take with f or h even though normally you're supposed to take toward the center. You generally don't want to do this, because then your pawns get stranded on this. But actually, it's not even bad to mirror image the opponent there. So really, the knight should go to f4, and that is exactly what happens in the game. Knight f4, and now Magnus plays a4. a4 is a nice move. The pawn on d3 is hanging. The pawn on d3 is hanging, but it cannot be taken. If it is taken, you play pawn takes, and after queen e2, you hit the knight, and then you hit the pawn. And if Alireza does something like this and loses the b5 pawn, the trade of d3 for b5 is substantially worse for black. It is substantially worse for black because let's say something like this happens. If the knight retreats, white just infiltrates, this pawn falls. Once this pawn falls, I've infiltrated the ranks of the castle. I mean, just imagine ancient battles, right? I'm in the castle. I'm gonna get to the most important members of the royal family. That's what's gonna happen over here. Your attack is just not fast enough on this side of the board. So, Alireza needs to maintain the defense there, and he slides the queen back to f7. He's actually ready in many ways to leave the position if necessary. Or, never mind, he is ready to go g5. G5 is a typical Firouzja move. The first three letters of the last name say it. Fear, fire on the board. G4, H5, G4, we're just going for it. In fact, I think in many ways, Alireza was inspired by the game of Wesley So, who actually, in a very similar manner, attacked Magnus yesterday and put him under pressure. Only in that game, Magnus spent a ton of time. And today, he's playing a little bit faster. Magnus sees this. Now, how do you prevent an attack before it develops into anything? You immediately chop down the pieces. Magnus here initiates a sequence where there are 8 captures in a row. So for 8 turns, something will disappear from the board. See, with white, if you wait, if you play like h3, rook e1, etc., it's going to be really bad. Another instructive moment here, if you play something like a5, just, again, locking the position, black goes g4, then you go back, then black goes h5, and you are under massive attack. If you ever want to stop an attack, you need to unlock the position. You have to counter on the other side of the board, open things up. A locked position benefits the attacking player. And that's why Magnus plays pawn takes b5. And now we get pawn takes, 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 takes. And queen d7. And Magnus went into the confessional booth at this point, which is this like, which is a booth where they confess. And it's a thing done at tournaments where players can share their thoughts with the general public. And obviously their opponent doesn't know because they don't have access to devices during the games. And so Magnus had said, after this sequence, pawn takes, 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 and then, you know, taking, undoubling his opponent's structure, but finding this key move, queen d7, that he thought his position was better because after pawn takes, queen takes c6, Magnus thinks that in the long run, the knight is better than the bishop, and black has too many scattered pawns, and furthermore, black launched an attack on the same side, but when you launch an attack on the same side, you've pushed the pawns in front of your king, which means in the long run, not only do you have weak pawns, you have a potentially weak king. I think Alireza saw this sequence, but missed one key idea. That's my prediction. I think Alireza missed pawn takes g3, queen takes knight, pawn takes f2, and here you would think if white plays rook takes, the rook comes in with check. If white plays king h1, that might be reasonable, and then pick up a pawn. But how about this move? King takes f2. That's a nasty little move. The king takes the pawn. The king never joins a board like this with a queen staring down and a rook staring down. But after this moment, you are stuck. Because black has a hanging rook, a hanging pawn, a targeted pawn, and another targeted pawn. 5 things in black's position are under pressure. And all this king has to do is go straight back inside. Pop his head out, little bit of rain, get the package from the mailbox, come back, wipe your face, and you've got the package. And that's it. King on f2. Rook a2 check is very short-lived dopamine. After rook a2 check, the king goes back, the queen is under attack, and black is just lost. Straight up losing here. So Magnus outcalculates everything here, but in the confessional booth, he did mention, unless he has missed something and misevaluated, because he has been doing that the entire tournament, he wouldn't fully trust himself, which is kind of funny. Now here, on a very high depth, I ran this position through, it's automatically, anytime Magnus plays, there's something called Sesse, S-E-S-S-E, which is a Norwegian very, very high depth computer, which might just be Stockfish, and it follows his games on a very high depth here. The engine thinks that black is still fine, which is very fascinating. Why is black fine? White is about to win a pawn, maybe another pawn, knight back to d2 and go to an endgame. The computer doesn't care that it's going to be down a pawn. The computer with the queen and the bishop knows that these are long-range pieces, and in the long run will put a lot of pressure on the white king. The white king is actually just as unsafe, maybe, as the black king. But Alireza is a human, all right? And he has to defend a very unpleasant position. Apparently, king e2, running into the center, very bold, was better. Putting the king, tucking the king over on g1, it looks safer. You think the king is in the corner, but if you go to the corner, there are a lot of positions. The queen and the pawn and the bishop can corner your king, and we're going to see that. It's actually better to be out in the open where it's harder to get to you. Ironic, because you think out in the open, it is easier to get to you. In an endgame, maybe not. In a middle game with a lot of pieces, yes. Magnus goes king g1. Alireza should go bishop d6. That is the best move. And Magnus picks up a pawn and is like, bro, I'm just up a pawn. Like, I don't know what the idea is here. g4, knight d2. And now, Alireza needed to just move out of the way. The computer wanted him to move, rook f8, king f8, and allegedly this position where white is just very comfortably up a pawn, this is around equal. On a high depth, the computer goes queen g5. It's hard for white to move the knight, the queen comes in. And after something like bishop e5, it is very hard for white to make progress here. White's king is weak. It's kind of weak. Now, if the king had been on e2, I'm not saying this would have been any easier, but now you certainly can't go there. Because if you try to go there, I immediately attack this pawn. Now, again, if we hypothetically were here, actually white is winning. Isn't that incredible? The king needs to be in the center, because what would happen is you would hide the king over there, and there would be nothing to attack. Since there is nothing to attack, like on h2, you can just leave. You can just go away. But when the king is here, you can't do that. So white needed to run his king. Magnus had to run his king in this direction faster. But Alireza didn't quite understand this and went bishop to f4, trying to play bishop e3 check. And that is exactly what he did. He put his bishop on e3. So his bishop moved from there to there. That looks like a very natural thing. And now he went queen g7. His logic was, my bishop on d6 is worse than my bishop on e3. Here, at least it's doing something. He's not entirely wrong. Queen back to d3 from Magnus. And after bishop b6, the advantage is now very substantial for white. Again, Alireza needed to play rook takes and try to hang on with queen and bishop. This king, again, just a little precariously positioned. It can't really get out of the territory. If rook f1 had been played, actually there's a very reasonable case to play king f1. And after queen g5, to maybe go king e2, to yet, go for this. But again, you have problems. That's the issue. Anyway, Alireza goes bishop b6. I think Alireza sort of gave up here. Dare I say. A little bit he gave up. And now Magnus goes queen e2, h5. And this is not an exaggeration, Magnus solves this position. It's an endgame. It's still an endgame. It's not so easy. Knight f1, you can't, knight f1, you can't really go. Black is always threatening all sorts of stuff on the f-file. It's not as easy as it looks. Very easy to blunder a checkmate. Magnus solves this position. There is one and only one way to win this. One and only one way. The first move that you have to play is h3. You have to soften this structure to be able to break out with your king and get your queen and knight out of the way. Black goes queen g7, Magnus chops that down. That's step one. That has now been softened, so it's harder for black to actually move the queen. Now, you lock the bishop out of the game. Look at the top line of the computer. c4. You are threatening c5. If Alireza plays bishop here, or if Alireza goes c6, the winning idea for white is knight f1 and knight h2 and winning this pawn. Had you started with knight to f1, you would have lost this pawn, and even though this looks promising, it's not. You have to save your c-pawn, then you have to go knight to f1, then you have to go knight to h2, and this concept to win this pawn wins the game for white. Even though you win a pawn back, your king, which you weakened, loses you the game. Knight e5, queen h5, queen h7, queen g8, queen g7, king h3. There are now no points of counterplay, and the game can be just decided by pushing the g-pawn, queen f7 at the right moment. Alireza goes for something, knight takes c6, 2 pawns up, queen endgame. He can suffer here for a little while. He makes a couple of more moves, but Magnus brings the king. There is no counterplay. He will lose the 3rd pawn, and it will come with a check, and Alireza Firouzja resigns. Magnus, straight up, without exaggeration, solved this position. He played h3, this transfer, c4 with the idea to go c5, and that is exactly how he won the game. Vintage performance. As if he did not lose 3 games in the first 4 rounds of this tournament. 5 rounds? 5 rounds. Incredible game. Very, very nice game. And just funny how, he needed to move his king to the middle. And Alireza could have maybe defended a little bit more accurately, but tough game. Yeah, and how about the standings? So Firouzja is going to stand exactly where he is. Magnus is going to get the 7.5 because that's the scoring of the tournament. The other classical games amongst the gentlemen were very, very exciting this round. So this one was kind of straightforward. Vincent Keymer versus Gukesh. Gukesh yesterday beat Prague. We have a London, by the way. We have a London opening. The move c3 is played because if you play bishop f4 straight away, black doesn't have to play e6. Black can mirror image you with a London. Black can play c6. Black can play c5 and then queen b6. But when you go here, this move either baits black into playing c5 in one go, or not playing c5 and playing a tempo down, playing a tempo investment in e6. And now we are in a London. And actually, what's funny about this is Gukesh plays what I play as black. I mean, I play a million things against the London, but bishop e7. The idea of bishop to e7 is that if white develops with the bishop, black plays knight to h5. That is the idea. Bishop develops, the knight goes to h5 and targets the bishop. You stop bishop g5. If white goes here to make room for the bishop, black now plays this. And the difference is that if black had played that immediately, you would have gone bishop g3. So by making you go h3, you can no longer play bishop g3. Yes, I've actually played this myself with black. Vincent plays bishop d3, castles, rook e8, and it's clear that black wants to go e5. And now Vincent plays e4, and Gukesh is forced to enter a very sharp variation. It's a very sharp line. Black has to go e5, bishop g5, hang on here with bishop to e6, or this. But this is a very unpleasant position, as white is just picking up a pawn in the middle of the board. And, you know, with black, you have to play this accurately. In this position, you have to take on e4. It's a very sharp line, but you have to take the pawn on e4. Gukesh doesn't do that. He goes here, and instead, he tries to win the pawn on b2, and he does. This, however, is just better for white. It's better for white because this pawn is much more useful in the middle, and these open lines to the queen side are very beneficial for white. Now, Vincent does not exploit it the best possible way. Here, he needed to go rook fd1 and then try to win this pawn, and that is better according to the computer. Like, the computer really likes open lines for all the pieces. It can sort of envision all of the open squares and how they will be utilized by the different white pieces. A human instead will go for a weakness and do something like this, where you do ultimately get some sort of good coordination. So Vincent will keep putting pressure on Gukesh. Gukesh is defending himself, but the knight is going to be better than the bishop because the knight, oh my gosh, my nose is itchy. Because the knight can fight on the light squares, and the bishop just cannot do. Oh my God. April, May, just every year, just March, April, May, just awful. Queen takes b7, and ultimately, white is just going to be up a pawn. Again, computer thinks it's around equal. It doesn't find much value in this pawn, but we're humans. It's a lot harder for us to play a position where we're just down a pawn forever. And now Vincent's just going to try to convert this endgame. This is honestly like 1920s chess, like Capablanca. Capablanca won a bajillion games like this. He just went a pawn up. His opponents didn't put the pieces on all the right squares. Really, like, if you think about it, how can this be 0.3? White has an extra pawn. That's 1 point. Okay, it doesn't have to be 0 point. It doesn't have to be +1. I don't understand how the computer can just, decrease the value of the pawn that much. But it's so unconvinced by the advantage. I'm not even sure what Gukesh could have done differently. Like, rook g6 check is inaccurate. Apparently, rook c4 is better. Just sort of vaguely floating the rook on an active square. I think probably 8 out of 10 humans lose this game with black. And the other 2 get lucky. Maybe it's even 9 out of 10. Anyway, Gukesh, rook takes a7 here. Very nice tactic. Obviously, the bishop cannot, there's this hanging piece. And rook takes. And ultimately, Gukesh just loses because he is one of those 8 out of 10 humans, if not 9 out of 10, that will just lose this game. From the opening, he went wrong. He didn't take the pawn on e4. He went this way, which allowed Vincent to preserve his pawn majority like this, the 4 on 3. And Vincent just converted the 4 on 3. He just pushed the pawns. He had a majority, and he just moved them forward. I mean, it was very, very nice, good coordination. Ultimately, he has a 3 on 3, but he has a central majority, and he also has the outside pawn here. And yeah, just a very nice game from Vincent. Very, very well played. Gukesh wins a game, loses a game. Everybody in this tournament can beat everybody. Magnus doesn't even overtake Vincent in the standings, but they both overtake Gukesh. And the last game, Wesley just beat Magnus Carlsen, so he's probably, riding a little bit of an energy boost. This game is a semi-Slav. Very, 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 very historic opening. Bishop e2, bishop d6. And b3, super solid line. Prague does not play super solid. He doesn't play b6, bishop b7, which is or e5 even. He plays Stonewall, knight in, and f5. So I really like this choice. The idea is quite simple. Queen f6, g5, g4. If you want to play at your local chess club, or even online, Stonewall Dutches and Stonewalls for white, like this type of structure, I play the structure with white when I play the Trempowski, and the benefit is I get my bad bishop out. So it's like a really great version. You just crush people. Like, people have absolutely no idea how to play against this structure, ever. Problem is Wesley's really good, right? So he plays g3, he plays a4. Prague is gonna come in here with g5, just completely looking to take the head off. But Wesley, very nice, pokes at the middle here and just brings the knight back. It's It's not that simple to checkmate somebody, and now Pragg is going to have to live with the potential weaknesses that he's created, and Wesley begins firing back. And the worst part about a game like this is, like, you know, you had an attack and a very clear plan, and now you really don't have an attack. It's kind of a mess. Nice move from Pragg, giving up the g-pawn to take on e3 with check in the future, and the future is right now, and now e5. The problem with all this, it looks really good. The problem is you are running out of firepower. Like, I'm going to take this pawn and this pawn, and then we're probably going to trade a bishop or a knight or a queen, and we're probably heading for a draw. Like, if we're being serious, pawn takes d5. Now knight takes d5 is the best move, actually, but he goes here, which is wrong. And now Wesley takes another pawn, and now no one's going to mate anybody here. In this position, it's just around equal. If anybody's better, practically, it's probably the guy who has a target, right? Like d5, a 2-on-1 in every endgame is going to be problematic. So Wesley goes rook c1. Pragg is still kind of attacking, but Wesley's unafraid. He's looking to trade the queens. Pragg goes d4. It can be a little hard to take your foot off the gas in certain positions like this. Queen h5, he's still looking to attack, but Wesley just resilient, kicking out the queen, and he's not going to get checkmated. Rook e2, there's even king g1, and at some point in this game, Pragg was probably like, I'm going to have to be very accurate in this endgame. Like, this is not an easy position at all. The pawn that I have is going to fall, and we're going to see, just like Gukesh, might be difficult to defend this endgame. So Wesley, all of a sudden, Wesley wins a pawn. Like, in this entire skirmish, when Wesley landed the knight on c4, you had to start thinking, like, hey, if this goes to a position where white doesn't get checkmated, he's going to win. Wesley's just going to take the pawns. All these pawns that are now, the long-term weakness of Black's plan. And at this point, just like the Gukesh game, it's equal. But practically speaking, it doesn't feel equal. He gives away the pawn. It's still around equal. Rook b8 is a good move. Rook b5 is good. You know, you're only up one pawn over here. So king f2 and now king g7. And apparently here, you needed to go knight a6, knight c5. You basically had to reposition the knight, give away this, get this, and try to guard that endgame. And since you did not do that, it's just winning for white. Pragg accidentally allows the king to walk there, and he's just going to end up losing his d-pawn or losing some material, and he's just in a lost endgame. This is simply a losing king and pawn endgame, king and rook endgame. 2 pawns up, rook d4 check. If you take, I go here, 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 here. This is winning for white. You have to know how to win this. You have to know how to win this. That's the one key detail. If you push this pawn now, it's a draw. Isn't that incredible? When you want to win a king and pawn endgame, I have videos on this and so on, but your king needs to guide the pawn. So king e4, king d6, king f5, king e7. Your king needs to guide the pawn. Even this is a draw. Isn't that incredible? But king g6 is winning. Or king g5 as well, but king g6. And now this is winning. You have to know why this is winning as opposed to every other type of opposition. Anyway, Wesley gets the job done. So Wesley's in first place. Wesley is in first place with 11.5 points. And then we're going to obviously take a look at the standings. Let's take a look at the games in the women's section. First things first, Divya, Wenjun. Divya won a game yesterday in classical chess. She now leads the tournament. And she is playing the world champion. She could have been playing the world champion in a match had she won the candidates, right? So that's kind of a trippy feeling that you're up against the champion of the world. A Spanish, unlike the Carlsen game, instead of knight c3, we have castles d3. And now, if she wanted to play the exact same way, she could have went a3, knight c3. That would have been the exact same line as the Magnus game. But she goes a4, okay? Very reasonable. Black plays b4. Now white can't develop the knight to c3, but white chooses to play like this. Nowadays, you can play any way that you want, okay? So a5 and c3, rook b8, and we see, in fact, this trade that I showed you in the Magnus game, trying to win a little bit of control over this square, and clearly Divya wants to go knight d2, and maybe knight c4, and maybe knight e3. What's funny is this plan, I don't think is as strong in this particular structure. I think when your knight is not easily getting to c3, it doesn't easily get to d5, I think. I am not a Spanish expert by any means. The position is around equal. We see Wenjun move the knight over here. Maybe to f4 as well. Maybe then g6 or g5, bishop g7, etc. d4 from Divya. But from the opening, it was the champion of the world, showing the class and the experience. Even though the center was a little bit open, she still managed to launch an attack. And I hope at this point you are seeing the value of the same side attack in the Italian and the Spanish, g5, g4, happening quite frequently. In the Italian, it happens when the bishop is here. Now the bishop is not there, but still it works. All right, knight to d2. Now she softens up that side of the board. Excellent maneuvering into the white position. She's probably just positionally nearly winning here. Queen f6, knight e3, her position is winning. Positionally, the game is not a positional game. It's a very dynamic game. Queen to c6, queen f1, and now just h5. The computer loving the position for black. And before you know it, the evaluation's just going to fall off a cliff. It doesn't feel like Divya crossed the center line of this board. It just feels like there is nothing she can do. Bishop to d5. The queen takes the pawn. Knight c4 at this point. Black is already up a pawn and has the better position. And I think around move 34, right here, it's over. The evaluation is on the floor. You can win this game with black in just a couple of moves. The move h3 is completely ruthless. Just an absolutely disgusting move. The rook is coming to h8. Everything is opening up. The king must be mated. She sacrifices the knight, which is also a very nice move. And after this, rook takes f3. Knight takes h4. You can take it with the bishop. That's what she does. e5. There's a few tricks, but black is ultimately just up a piece. There is this, and there is this. How do you win this position? Rook e3. Rook e3, and if rook takes h4, rook d8 pins the bishop to the rook, and also pins the bishop to the king. And what am I talking about? You have ideas to sacrifice the rook. So, for example, there are some lines here where, like, you do this, I can take on d5, not immediately, but like even immediately actually, bishop b7, and you just win because this. So rook d8 is a fatal pin on this bishop and ultimately this king. But Wenjun goes here, and then Divya actually comes back into the game because here black is still maybe winning, but not after this. She blunders. Rook h7 check, a defensive rook sacrifice. This is unbelievable. Rook h7 sacrifices the rook, and if you take it, bishop e4 check, this must be like jumping in an ice bath, but you didn't want to jump into it, all right? You were pushed into an ice bath, and you were pushed into an ice bath off a bridge. Okay, so really a lot of things are working against black here. She loses her advantage completely and has to win this rook endgame, which I have seen Divya save a lot of rook endgames. All right, she also, that game against Gadachkin and the candidates, I can't remember if she was winning that game, I think, and it ended, I can't remember. The tournament was 1,000,000 games and a half. This is still not an easy endgame to defend because black is going to try to bring the king over to the other side of the board. It's very, very tricky. Rook a4 is losing. Rook a4 is losing. She had to not play rook a4. I don't really get it, to be honest with you. If I click through the moves, I mean, and both of them were blundering a draw here. White, I think, basically needed to go g4. And if the king ran over here, you go king g3, king c5. The defensive setup looks like g4 and then like just keeping, yeah, g4, king g2. Rook a4 is wrong because black can play f5. So the defensive setup for white involves a pawn on g4, a king here, and a rook here. That's the defensive setup for white. By allowing white to go g4, you're blundering a draw. By allowing black to play f5, you're blundering f5 now is winning. King b5, you still can't take the pawn. She goes to take the pawn thinking it's a draw. It's not a draw. This is not a draw. It's not a draw because the king and the rook are too close. They are too close. Had this been this position, like this is a draw. Isn't that amazing? The king and the pawn up one each is a draw, but this is not a draw. They are too far, and they don't have enough time to walk together. She forgets about rook e1. The king is going to get close like this, and this is, unfortunately, you will just lose this. So Divya needed to be on the 4th rank to make a draw. Ultimately, a lot of these classical games are decided in deep, deep, deep time trouble. You are making a decision late in the game, this white needed to go g4. King would have ran over. You would have kept the king here. King b5. You would have went to a, and then she would have went here, and you would have kept giving checks. So the way Divya had to draw this was a pawn on g4, and then the king can never actually get rid of you, and that is difficult. That is a hard thing to understand when you are deep in time trouble. Now, here's a game between Bibisara and Humpy Koneru, which was a Scotch gambit. Very sharp line. The game ended in 11 moves. Bishop e3, bishop c5, the knight attacked the bishop, the queen protected, the knight went back, the queen went back, the knight went here, and these players made a draw in actually an hour of play. 2 hours, but both of these moments, White spent like 20 minutes, so that's kind of incredible. Here the best line for White was to take, queen g4, not c5, sorry, I'm f5. Mirrored the pawn. And then this is the variation. Anyway, they drew, so we have to play Armageddon. And now Bibisara just changed it. She played d4. Queen's Gambit declined. As we know, Armageddon is 3 points, no longer 3 points. It's White having a 3-minute time advantage and trying to play for a win. Perfect position to try to play for a win, by the way. Very dynamic, very fitting Bibisara style. Also up 3.5 minutes on the clock. Bibisara is just a monster. This format really suits a World Blitz champion. Incredibly dynamic position. Black has a minute on the clock, and now Black has lost. And in 20 moves, she absolutely dominates. Queen takes d6, sacrifices the queen, because if this is mate, if only all chess games could just be routes. 20-move obliteration. But this is only Armageddon. It only happens in Armageddon. Bibisara spent an hour thinking about a repetition and then wins the game in like 5 minutes. And that is Armageddon for you. Last but not least, I have Drew Jin-er versus Anna Muzychuk. This game had one interesting moment. It was a Queen's Gambit. It was a Grunfeld, which is a very interesting opening. The problem with the Grunfeld is everybody knows it. So this line, this is like a main line. Grunfeld, very good opening, underrated opening, actually, for intermediates. I used to think it was kind of over theory, but it's not. It's very practical. Anyway, this has all been played before. White was thinking on her own, but I think even this is theoretical. Bishop takes, knight d4 is a pawn sacrifice. Black gets the bishop pair and has some obscure pressure on the queen side. Like, visually, this position is very odd, because if Black just starts pushing the pawn, Black will just win. So White needs to act. White has to trade the bishop. That's what she does. And I really like the way White's position looks here, but it's equal. You know, again, you have a pawn majority similar to the Vincent Keymer game, but you have no imbalance. You have no knight for bishop. Yeah, Black also has the outside pawn here, so it's not a pawn advantage. Anyway, she wins the pawn. So Anna just gives away the pawn, plays rook b2, and we have this position. This reminds me of the Hikaru Candidates games, where he was a pawn down in a rook endgame, but he was defending. Black is just trying to play purely on activity here. White has to make a bunker, and has to try to win this position, which is basically unwinnable. King f6 or king f8, you can make a draw here. Look at White, she's making some progress, very nice. I said this game only really had one interesting moment, and it comes around move 50, as, again, 4-on-3, pawn endgame, majority is a draw. But it's especially a draw when you can't even move your king. So she's going to try to get her king moving. There it is. And maybe she can go for g4. It's all still a draw. You have to know how to draw king and rook versus king, rook, and pawn. That's a little bit hard, but, well, not for these players. Anyway, no, not 50, like move 70. White made a lot of progress. It's still a draw. It's still a draw. It's still a draw. And unless the broadcast was completely wrong right here, White blundered the game away. Both players blundered that you could take this pawn with a check and then put the rook back on h4. Now, I don't know if this is a broadcast mistake. I don't know. But if you take with check and then just put the rook on h4, you just want a pawn for free and your pawns just walk. King g3, king f5, king g6, rook h7. You win the pawns and you win the game. That is incredible. That h7 is played, and ultimately Black just stopped the pawn, and the game is a draw because you can't take this pawn. Rook here would win your rook, yeah, draw. which was the right result. But rook e4, rook h4 is just like, can you imagine losing a game with rook e4, rook h4 in classical? I mean, your heart would sink. It's just, yeah, chess is brutal. Anyway, Armageddon. And the Armageddon was a very different story. Here, Muzychuk went for a Dutch. I love it. Leningrad, one of my favorite Dutch defenses, clearly looking for a nasty fight. But Zhu Jiner just came with a very nice game plan, and she just spoiled the fun. She gave Anna Muzychuk a disaster of a position. This is not really Anna's style. Her style is much more compact, positional, very smart chess. And here Anna Muzychuk has to play a position which I am used to playing, which looks like garbage. Because it is. It's just not, you know, it's just not it. And it's a little bit against the style. Clearly she wanted to just play for a win, but it did not work out. Knight here, you have to go here, knight before black resigns. And I don't cover the Armageddon games with that much detail because they're very chaotic and a lot of blunders, and the players play for like 4 or 5 hours and then they just make, you know, crazy mistakes, or they win in like, you know, in like 10 minutes with queen sacrifices. So the women's standings get another shakeup. Bibisara is back on top. Divya is still in second because Anna Muzychuk and Wenjun did not score the necessary amount of points to overtake her. Still anybody's tournament. Zhu Jiner can win a game. Even Humpy can win a game and be back in the running. And for the gents, Magnus is now in 4th. Pragg is in last. Gukesh is in last. Second to last. Doesn't really matter because anything can happen. But Wesley's winning the tournament. My guy. That's all I have for you today. Check out the book. Check out the tour. I'll see you in October later this year. Big month, October, November, by the way. Big month. My book comes out. Tour. World Championship. I don't know which of those 3 is the most important, but, you know. Anyway, get out of here.